Today, we are going to be talking about all things reporting. We're going to be mastering our restaurant financial health with Restaurant 365's reporting and analytics. My name is Mark Cohen. I'm a solutions architect with Restaurant 365. I've been with the company for 8 years, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes. Some quick housekeeping. We're going to be recording this webinar, so you will get a copy of this presentation sent to the email address used to register for the webinar. You can add any questions you like by clicking the QA at the bottom of the screen. I'll do my best to answer as many of those as possible at the end of the webinar. And if you need any help, you can contact us at marketing@restaurant365.com. So let's talk about what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at configuring our reports, consuming our reports, customizing our reports, and then, like I said, time permitting, we'll get to as many questions as possible at the end. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is address this nav experience you're seeing here. I am going to be using the new nav experience for today's webinar. Not all of you users will have seen this yet. It is slowly rolling out, but I figured I'd enable it for today's webinar so people can get a sense of what this experience is going to look like. First thing I want to talk about is configuring our reporting setups. So if I go to our admin section, we're going to look at securities and permissions. And there's a couple of different ways we can allow people to access our reporting module. So in our users and permissions skill tree, we have a dedicated reporting tree that allows different levels of access to different reporting areas in our software. I'm just going to look at our above store manager here, search for the word reporting. And you'll see here we have an entire tree giving them access to ad hoc reports, our custom financial reports, which we're going to dig into later in the webinar, our packages, our ability to edit and customize the financial reports and templates, and then our intelligence solution reporting subscriptions, which we're going to talk about as well. And then our standard reporting, this just gives them access to my reports and being able to set custom views and view the P&L comparison page, which I do want to talk about because this is a very cool page in our software that is locked behind this user setting. So if they don't have this enabled, they're not going to be able to see it. So we'll look at that in just a second. The other thing I want to call out while we're here are these reporting roles. So these allow us to create default reporting roles that we can then apply to our users in bulk. So we're not configuring access to reports by user, we're doing it by role. And the really cool thing about this is it allows us to sort of configure our managers, let's say. There are so many reports in Restaurant 365, it can be overwhelming for store managers. So this allows us to sort of distill and refine the reports they have access to and that they can see. And then additionally, if we're giving them access to some of the financial reports, like the P&L in our software, which I do recommend giving your managers access to, that is a living, breathing document in our software. It is totally drillable and searchable. And if you're using the software on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that is a true benchmark of how we're doing with our sales, our labor, and our COGS. And you can decide how much of the P&L they want to see by controlling the settings here. So I can decide, do I want to give them full access to the P&L, just access to the controllables, or maybe I just want to cut it off at the prime cost. So then they're just looking at their sales, their labors, and their COGS. So a really easy way to sort of distill the reporting for the P&L and cut it off for different users and different levels of the software. So once you've got your reporting rules set up and you've configured your reports, you've decided how you want to cut off the P&L for your managers and your store level operators, then we can talk about how we want to configure some of the settings that apply to the reports they're viewing. So we're going to go over and navigate back to admin. We're going to go to locations and legal entities. And I want to show you a couple of features on the location tab that we can use. And we'll see these a little later on in the reports we're going to look at. This is how we're going to be setting goals for our store. So I'm just going to open up this location here. And there's a couple of things happening on this tab that I want us to pay attention to. The first one is the goals tab. So this is where we can set flat goals for labor, SPLH, sales, and these are going to show up on some of the ops reports we're going to look at later. So you're going to see a couple of labor reports that are going to reference this labor goal number. You're going to see a couple of ops reports that are going to reference these sales goals. And these are really easy way to set quick targets on some of our canned reporting for your managers that they'll be able to benchmark themselves against in addition to our forecast and our budget. The other thing I want to call out while we're here are these reporting categories. We're going to talk a lot about these today. You have 10 of these to play with. And this is where we assign different levels of reporting category to locations in the software. So you've got 10 of these, think of them as parent level reporting categories like brand, and then within brand, we can have an infinite number of children. So these are all the different brands I can associate with my locations. And then I can decide on status. In this case, we're doing team, district manager, sales volume, Like I said, you've got 10 of these to play with. They could be region, state, comp store versus non-comp. There's a number of different ways to slice and dice your reporting in the software, and these are very powerful and totally customizable. So let's talk about what these look like once you get into running. I'm going to navigate over to my reports. And the first report I'm going to call out is our P&L. So the customized panel on the P&L has a lot of options. The first one I want to call out is the report type. We have a number of different P&Ls in here that you can run, right? So you're not just limited to a single version of the P&L. The most popular one tends to be the operation statement, which I'm going to show you a little later on. I also want to call out this show unapproved option. This is really critical when you're running any sort of financial report, because this is going to decide whether the software is going to pull in unapproved versus approved transactions. So if we're doing apples to apples comparisons across multiple reports, you really want to make sure you've got this configured the same across all of your reporting runs. Otherwise, you're going to get some mismatched data. And then let's talk about those reporting categories again, right? Out of the box, we're going to let you filter by location and legal entity, but now you've got all these additional levels to filter by. So just by setting up those reporting categories, we can say, you know what? I want to run my P&L by brand. And now every store associated with this taco company will show up on that P&L. So it's a really easy way to get to the locations you need without making a bunch of clicks and selections within the customized panel. And then the last thing I want to call out on this pane are these saved views down here. So we have a number of different ways to view these reports. This customized panel can be a lot to navigate. So once you get it dialed in to a place you like it, then I recommend saving that view. So I'm just going to go back, pull the P&L back up. I'm a fan of this view. I've called it my Asada Irvine operational view. And if I wanted to make a change to it, maybe I don't want unapproved, then I could add this as a new view by clicking this little plus sign. I could rename it my new view. I could save that. And then I can decide, do I want this to be my default view moving forward by enabling that box? Do I want this to be a public view so everybody that uses the software can see my view? Or does this just apply to me? And then do I want to make this default for all my users? So for a lot of our reports, we want everybody looking at the same information. So I do recommend, if you configure your P&L, your actual versus theoretical, in a format that you want applied across the entire org, then I would set this to yes and disallow changes. So now your users, when they come in here to run their P&L, all they have to do is pick their period, pick their calendar, and run it, right? The rest of it, the rest of the thought and the rest of the options are taken out of the process for them, and then we can really distill it down so everybody's looking at the same information. And then finally, this reporting page is totally searchable. So there is a search bar up in this top left. The new nav experience, also searchable, I will call out. So you can search for anything you're looking for in Restaurant 365, but maybe I'm looking for some sort of daily report. I can just type the word daily, and anything with daily in the title is going to pop up for me. And you'll see these little stars. These are our favorites. I do like calling these out. This makes it really easy to get the reports you want to see very quickly. If we go to my favorites panel, you're going to see I've got a bunch selected that we're going to review today. This applies only to the user that's selecting them. This isn't global. So your favorites are your favorites. Your other users are not going to see them. So I do recommend when you find a report you like, click that little star so you don't forget it and you remember it. And then finally, let's talk about reporting subscriptions. So report subscriptions are super powerful. They live within the custom financial report writer. They live within my reports. They live within our intelligence solution. And the way you set these up, obviously you need to have access to it as a user level. We saw that in the reporting skill tree. Clicking on this will give you access to the report subscriptions. And here you can see all the active subscriptions and non-active subscriptions. And here we can also create and add new subscriptions. So you can see we've got some P&L set up. We've got a status, a flash report. For those of you that haven't seen this DSS status report, I'm not going to show it today, but it is a daily report you can get letting you know if all of your DSS have come in or not. So a really easy way to troubleshoot any polling issues you might be having. For today, though, I want to add a subscription. So I'm going to click the add button. And these are all the reports that are available to add. So this includes reports we've created in the custom financial report writer, as well as my reports. Now, the one caveat being, if I do want to add one of these reports, the requirement is that I have one of those saved views, right? So when I created that saved P&L view, that locked that report in that mode based on those customizations. And really, the subscription module requires those in order to know how you want the report set out. So if we're talking about the flash report or the daily sales report, and let's say you want this to go out to all of your store managers, you would need to create a review, a saved view by location for each of those stores, because the report subscriptions do not look at the location security on the user record. So if you just set up a flash report with all locations enabled and it went to everybody in the company, they would see all locations. So I do recommend, if you only want the managers seeing the stores they have access to, you set up a location view for each store, and then you can set up a unique subscription for each location. The other thing I want to call out is something very new and very exciting, is we now have subscriptions for our actual versus theoretical reporting. So this has been a long time coming. So the tricky part with report subscriptions is we really needed you to tell us how often you wanted to send it, what day of the week you wanted to send it, what date range. But we all know the AVT requires a stock count in order to trigger. So now I can say, okay, I want my AVT to go out on my Asada Taco view. I want it to use this count template that they're using at the store, and use the most recent -1 for my from count, and then use most recent inventory for my to count. And then I can say, okay, if we're doing inventory weekly, I want this to go out every week. We do inventory on Sunday. I want this to go out every Monday. Let's say it comes out at 8 in the morning. And now I can get an AVT sent to my inbox. I don't have to go in and run it. It'll arrive every week. And then you'll notice here the recipients, these are going to show up as users that are in your software. So you can just go ahead and add your users. We're going to know the email address associated with that user record. You can rename the subscription, and you can decide what format the subscription goes out in. So really, really powerful way to set up reporting and circumvent your users having to go in and run the reports themselves. We can just deliver this to their inbox in a timely manner, and now they're looking at the information we really need them to look at. All right, so that was a lot, but that is configuring your reports, right? We want to set up our users, we want to set up our reporting roles, then we want to configure our goals and our targets, and finally, we want to make sure we set up saved views for our users so they're looking at the report the way we want to look at it, and then we set up some subscriptions so now they don't even have to go in and run the report. Let's get to the meat of this. Let's talk about reports. So these are my favorite reports. I put stars next to them. We're going to go over all of them, just high level overview, but I do recommend taking a deep dive in some of these other buckets. There might be a category that pertains to your business that we're not looking at today that you might want to dig into. There are a ton of reports in here that you can star and add to your favorites. All right, so here we go. Advanced weekly sales and labor. This is a new report. Not a lot of people have seen it because, like I said, it just rolled out a few months ago. I'm a huge fan of this report at a corporate level, at a regional level, and also at a store level. So what it's giving me is a breakdown of my revenue by day part. It's giving me my forecasted net sales versus actual. It's giving me my prior year. It's giving me my actual labor against those goals we talked about setting on the location record. And if you are using our labor matrix, I'm going to give you your optimal labor hours. So what does that mean? That means I'm going to look at what you scheduled, what you sold, what you actually did. And based on your revenue, these are the hours that would have optimally let you hit that target. And this is what you actually ran. So we'll give you the delta between the two of those. Then we're going to show you actual versus scheduled. And then if you are counting entrees, we'll give you those metrics as well. Again, the customized panel will allow you to turn some of these columns on or off. So if you're not using all of these features, you can collapse them and hide them. I also love that it then gives me a breakdown by day. So same KPIs, but just broken out by day of the week. So really a lot of great information in a single report. This is a great one to set up on a subscription. The other thing I'm going to call out while we're here is this little question mark. This lives on all of the reports, and this will take you directly to the documentation for the report you're looking at. So this doesn't just take you to the landing page for our support center. This will take you to a page specific to this report explaining what every column and row is doing. So really, really easy way to find out, like, I don't know what this number is. This little question mark will take you to the documentation and it'll tell you. All right, next up, we have COGS allotment. So this is a report I really like because it's sort of the closest we're going to get to a declining checkbook. So the way this report works is it's looking at our budgets. So you do need to have budgets in place in order for this report to populate. That's what's going to populate our percentage targets based on our operational reporting categories, which we will talk about a little bit in a minute. And then it's going to look at our sales, look at our target. It's going to tell me what I'm allotted to spend, what I actually spent, and how far off I am for the month. So this is a great report to run throughout the period, so you can see how you're trending towards the end of the period. Just on purchasing we're talking about, but a really cool report that allots your spend based on your budgeted COGS and your actual revenue. Next up, we'll talk about the daily sales report. So I know everybody loves our flash report as a daily subscription in their inbox. I'm going to argue I like this report a little bit better because it gives me actual versus prior week versus prior year. It gives me prior 7, week to date, period to date. I get my breakdown by day part, same KPIs. I get my breakdown for my check count, my check average, my labor percent, and then all my deposit metrics that are coming over from my DSS. So I'm a big fan of this report. Just, it's got a little bit more meat on the bone than I think our regular flash report. A great one to set up. There's also an extended daily sales report if you want to look at it. That'll break this down by week, period, quarter, and year to date. Next up, we have the location comparison report. This report I really like because it allows you to sort of choose your own adventure. So if I go to the customize panel, I can pick the 3 KPIs I want to see on this report. So for this example, I did entree per labor hour, labor dollars, and sales per labor hour. But you could do net sales, check count, labor percent, paid outs. So you can really configure this with the 3 KPIs you want to look at, then decide what time frame you want it to be. In this case, we did day, but you also have the ability to do it by week, by period, by year, by quarter. These stacks, you can select multiples of them. And then you get this nice little breakdown. Okay, here's my labor dollars current, prior day, prior year, and then this is going to tell me if I'm trending below average. We're going to call out any days that are trending below average. Next up is the menu item analysis report. So for any of you that are getting into actual versus theoretical reporting or recipe builds, this is sort of your North Star. This is really going to show you where you need to prioritize the work because it's going to sort your menu items by quantity and sales volume, right? So you can see my top seller here is the Be My Burger, and I do not have a recipe in place for it. That is a problem, right? I need to figure out what my cost is on this so I can get a margin, and then I can decide whether this is an opportunity, a star, a puzzle, or a dog. So we have these 4 rankings we give the items based on what you're selling it for, what your cost is, and this cost is a true cost, right? It is tied to the recipe, which is tied to your AP, so it is updating in real time. Right? And this is a really easy way to go through and quickly figure out, well, where do I need recipes immediately, right? And I always say 80-20. That's my philosophy for most things. I'm going to focus on those first top 20 because those are probably making up 80% of my revenue. And that's what's really going to move the needle. So a great report to help you figure out where you need recipes pretty quickly. And also a great report for exactly what it's called, menu item analysis. Am I charging the right price for these items? Next, we're going to get into the P&L. We sort of already went over this, but this is that ops statement I talked about. This is the one I would send out to my managers because it is a trailing 4-week view with period to date, budget, prior year, and variance columns. So if we're doing weekly inventories, we've got our weekly labor coming in, we've got weekly sales coming in. This is a really great temperature check on a weekly basis so we can see how we're trending. That way, when we get to period end, we're not surprised by anything. We know exactly how we got there. Some of you might be noticing we've got a gross profit line, we've got an EBITDA line. I'm going to show you how to add those at the end of this reporting review because we can make some customizations to our canned P&L. We don't need to go into custom financial reporting immediately if we want to get some of these quick value adds to our canned reporting. And again, if I was cutting the P&L off for my managers, obviously we would probably cut it off after operating expenses, giving them access to controllables, and I would give them access to the store level net income because those are the dollars they can actually control. So they would not see the rest of the P&L if we were using that cutoff feature that I mentioned. Next up, I have receiving by purchased item. This is a great report, especially today when we're getting all these substitutions coming in. This is going to show you exactly the item, the purchase level item we're buying, who we're buying it from, and all the different ways we're buying it, all the different SKUs, all the different pack sizes, all the different pricing on it. So a really easy way to audit some of those substitutions you might be getting. You don't know when they came in or where they came in. This will really quickly roll them up to the master purchase item. And of course, anything blue is drillable. This will take you right to the invoice. You can see exactly what caused it and why it came in that way. Next up, I've got our sales and prime cost summary. Again, this is a nice, quick little way to view a P&L with some week-to-date, period-to-date, year-to-date metrics. We've got sales by day part. We've got guest count. We've got check averages, COGS. Again, these are going to be based on budgets. So you'll notice the weekly, That means this database is not budgeting weekly. They're only budgeting by period. So we can only give them budget data from period and year to date. We do allow for weekly budgets. So if you want this report to populate with weekly budget data, then we will need to get a weekly budget in there to populate those columns. But this is just a nice quick snapshot of exactly what it's called. It's your sales and your prime costs, your labor, and we give you a little SPLH down at the bottom as well. And then probably my favorite report that I would take to sort of my weekly manager meetings is the weekly review. This is run by location. This is one of the few places you are going to see your sales by service type. Sort of critical these days, right? I want to see how much third-party delivery I'm doing, how much takeout I'm doing versus dine-in. So this is one of the few reports that is going to break that revenue out for you. We also do it by day part and then by GL. And if I keep scrolling down this report, you're going to see I get my discounts and comps. I love this because I can expand it and I get this nice little preview of all the discounts and comps that are being used in my store. So this really allows me to see where we are giving away the money, right? I can really see all of my comp and discount detail broken out so I can know exactly how the managers are handling the in-store comps and discounts. Just cancel that. And then we've got our net sales versus prior year, our gross, we've got covers, we've got check average by day part, and then this is probably my favorite part of this report. We do this little mini trailing P&L. It's a 4-week trailing. We've got COGS, that includes inventory. We've got COGS, which is just purchases. So if we're not doing a weekly inventory, this is still a good benchmark to have. And then we've got these key controllables, and you can actually control what shows up in this section by tagging these accounts with operational reporting category, key controllables. Again, we're going to talk about those in a minute. I'll show you how to tag these GL, because I would argue not all of these are key controllables, right? Workers' comp, my manager has no control over that. I'm probably going to pull that out of there. Water, maybe utilities they've got some control over, but this is really where I want them to focus on things they can move the needle on, you know, chemicals, linen, janitorial, R&M, all those weekly spends. This is a nice way for them just to track those items independently without looking at an entire P&L. And then finally, we get a little labor snapshot. So again, these are based on our reporting categories. We've got front of house, back house, salaried, so a little trailing 4-week P&L. So those are my favorite reports right now that I love to look at on a regular basis. Again, there are a ton of reports in here that you could look at. So please search, go find some reports that work for you, make them your favorites. The last report I'm going to look at before we get into how we customize our reports is the profit and loss layout format. So this is a very powerful report because this shows you your GL structure as it will show up on all the canned P&Ls we've looked at today. And we do this based on 3 things. The first is what we call a GL type. So in this case, we have a GL type of sales, which has a sort order of 15.5. And then our next GL type is going to be prime cost. That has a sort order of 15.9. So that tells us what order to put these in on the report. Once we've looked at the GL type for the account, because you can't create an account in our software without assigning in a GL type, that's how we know where to put sales food, sales employee, you know, comps and discounts, all of those accounts. Once they're in the GL type, we then follow the parent-child relationship and the numerical hierarchy. And there's no changing that in the canned P&L. That's when we get into the custom financial report writer. That's when we can start to move. That's wild, wild west. We can do whatever we want in there. We can move accounts around. We can hide them, collapse them, remove them, delete them. But a couple of things I want to call out on this layout format. The first is these operational reporting categories. So this is how we tell all those ops reports we looked at. What is food sales? What is beer sales? What is liquor sales, right? So these are really critical, making sure all your GL accounts are tagged with those. We're telling it what is a discount, so we know how to calculate net sales. And then down here, we're telling it what is food COGS, what is beer COGS. And you'll notice we set it up so the system is referencing those accounts. We've told it, okay, we want our food costs to be relative to our food sales. So it's referencing the operational reporting category. I'll show you where we do that. That lives in the preferences pane. So if I go back to admin and I go to system setup and system preferences, there is a tab in here called miscellaneous. This is also where we looked at those reporting categories and those org structures. This miscellaneous tab controls a lot, right? It controls how we're separating your point of sale data. It controls how emails are sent, what time zone you're in, whether we're tracking payouts. There's more settings in here. I could probably do a whole webinar just on this tab, but for today, I want to talk about this setting here. This is what dictates how your P&L performs based on those reporting categories. So if I flip this to net sales, this all goes away. This just defaults to net sales, and now my COGS are based on net sales. But by enabling net sales with COGS, I've now told my P&L to reference my operational reporting categories. So it's a really easy way to flip your P&L into that COGS by revenue center without having to go into each account and individually configure them, right? Because you can configure an account to behave based on another account. Much easier to do it with these location reporting categories. The other thing I want to call out while we're here are these hidden rows, right? So we've got our total cost. There's that gross profit. That was enabled by creating a running total. So let's go and add another one, right? So we go down here, we've got total marketing. Maybe I want to add right here after occupancy, maybe I want to add a running total for like, net profit or operating net profit, let's say. I'm going to drill into this account. And you can do this with GL accounts. You can do this with GL types. You can see there's a report setting option right here. And here's where we could dictate what account it triggers off of. We're not going to do that for occupancy. We want it off net sales. But this is what I want, my running total. And here I can say, okay, we're going to make this operating profit. And if I just leave this set to none, it's going to default as a percentage of net sales. And then I save that. Now we do a quick refresh. And you can do this throughout the P&L. So now after our occupancy costs, I've added an operating profit line. Then we get into G&A and utilities, and now we've got a store level net income. And of course, we've added our EBITDA line already. So you can add running totals all throughout your P&L wherever you want. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It is going to give you a running total for the dollars you have left. Once we've gotten out of sales, we've moved through COGS, labor, expenses. So really easy way to modify and customize your canned P&L. It breaks my heart when I hear about people exporting their P&L to Excel and adding these lines. You don't need to do that. We can do it in the software for you. So this is a very good report to run if you want to understand how your P&L is being generated, right? We've got percentage of net sales. This is going to show you how these accounts are calculating, what percentages they're using, whether they're using net sales or the operational reporting categories. Also a good way to catch any GL accounts that haven't been tagged with an operational reporting category. And this is usually the report I start in before we dive into the custom financial report writer, because this is what's going to set up our base for our row layouts in CFR. So with that, let's jump over to the custom financial report writer. I'm going to go back to the reporting section of this new nav experience, custom financial reports. This is probably my favorite thing that we've built in a long time. It's a very, very powerful module. There's a little bit of a learning curve. I wouldn't say it's steep. There are some great videos in the Academy that will get you up and running with a nice baseline. I'm going to go over some of the sort of high level functionality of the report writer today, and then you can dig in on your own time. We might do something a little more in depth later on in the year. But there's really 3 sections to this tool. The first one I'm going to call out are your templates. And those are exactly what we just looked at. That is that profit and loss layout. This is the skeleton of your P&L, the skeleton of your report. So every good report starts with a template. And you're going to see we have a bunch of default templates in here. Those mean they came from our core canned My Report solution. So you cannot modify, change, delete, or get rid of these. That's why they're default. But anything in here that's not tagged as default means it's something that you built in your organization. And I would argue you want to keep this area relatively clean, because once we leave templates and we go into My Reports, the minute you save a template, we're going to save a default version of that report. So you can see here I have this C test template, and the default version of every report just means we've left all selected. And you can see here, this template isn't even complete. It doesn't even have a column on it. I couldn't even run it. So the cleaner you keep your templates page, the cleaner the reports page is going to be. So let's talk about the different kinds of reports we have in here. You can build 4 kinds of reports in the financial report writer. The first, obviously, is the P&L. That's going to reference all the GL types associated with the profit and loss. The second is balance sheet, trial balance. Those are going to reference those accounts. And then we've got combination reports. So this allows you to mix and match balance sheet accounts and P&L accounts in a single report. Don't have a lot of people using these, but this is where you would go if you wanted to build a cash flow report, right? Because then I can build out my P&L at the top, I can get to my net profit, and then I can build my cash flow below it. The other cool thing about the combination reports is it allows me to dictate the behavior of the account. So I can take a beginning balance account and flip it into a net change and vice versa, which we have to do when we're building some of these cash flow reports, right? We need an AP balance to be net change in the cash flow, not a running balance. So there's some really cool stuff we can do in there. And then finally, we have packages. So once you've gotten your reporting package, all your reports are dialed in, you've got your trial balance, your balance sheet, maybe it's a comparative balance sheet you want to build because everybody seems to love to build that report first because we don't have that as a canned report. You've got your actual versus budget. Then you put those all together in a package. So if we look at this package, let's just edit it. Now you've got your month end down to a single click. So I'm going to run this month end package and it's going to pull all of the reports that I put in here. And I can add as many reports as I want to my packages. I can even have I can add a cover page. So really easy way to get your month end reporting down to a very, very minimal turnaround. The other thing I will call out while we're in here is even if you aren't creating custom financial reports, the ability to just come in here and run a P&L for all my locations, right, is huge. So now think of each of these checkboxes as a report. If I enable this, I'm now generating 54 P&Ls at once. So that's going to create basically a multi-tabbed workbook if I want to export it in PDF. If I export it to Excel, it's going to have all my formulas intact. So that's a big win here. Our canned reporting does not do that. So for those of you that like to work in Excel, all of the exports from CFR will have the formulas built in. And while we're in here, I want to call out this org structure. So this ties back to those reporting categories we talked about, right? So if I go back to that org unit page we were on that lives in the system preferences, I can sort of start to slice and dice how that org tree shows up in CFR. So right now, if I look at my setup, I'm doing it by brand, and then I'm doing it by DM. So we've gone in and assigned these stores to DMs, we've assigned them to brands, right? And you can layer these in, right? If we wanted to bring in legal entity, we could then bring in team. So you can imagine that this skill tree could go very deep if you wanted it to. And then, like I said, each of these checkboxes is a unique report. So by running this report structure here, I would have a consolidated report for the taco company, then a consolidated report for Anthony, and then his individual P&Ls for his store, and so on. The important thing to remember about this org tree too, though, is that there is a hierarchy to this. So let's say I didn't want Anthony in here, but I've still left Asada and all selected. They overwrite that. So I'm going to get Anthony whether I want it or not. So if I really want to exclude that, I need to turn off all and my consolidated company, right? Then I'm just going to get the checkboxes below it that I want. And maybe I just want to do those stores and I want to take out the commissary. So now I have the option to decide how I want those reports to be generated, right? So if I come down here, I can say, you know what, give me a consolidated and an individual. So that's going to give me all of these checkboxes rolled up on a single report and then individual P&Ls for each checkbox as well. So you can already start to see how powerful this module is, right? Even if we're not building custom reports, just the ability to slice and dice our data and generate multiple P&Ls with a single click, it's a bit of a game changer, especially for those of you with 8+ units. Now we're not running individual P&Ls at month end. We're not running individual balance sheets. We've got our packages set up. It really streamlines that whole month end close process. And the last thing I want to call out while we're on this page, obviously settings, again, super important, which calendar we're using. Are we showing approved transactions? You can save those when you're ready. So select the way you want the CFR to run, then save and run it. And lastly, you'll see this little data stamp down here. So in order for us to run 50 P&Ls relatively quickly, we store this in a separate data warehouse. And this is telling you the last time we synced with that data warehouse. So it happens about every 2 minutes. So if I click on this little icon, it's going to tell me, okay, the next refresh is coming up. It's going to take less than a minute. So I know some of our accounting folks can be a little impatient. If you do make a journal entry and you run back here and run a report, you're not going to see it immediately. So just take a minute, grab a coffee, come back, and it'll be there. So that's what that is telling you. So that is a quick overview of the CFR tool. I want to do a quick demonstration of what it looks like to build in here quickly. And then I do recommend getting in here and getting your hands dirty, right? That is the best way to learn. Go to the academy, watch some of the videos, come in here and start building something out. And I do recommend when you are building in here that you are working off some kind of mock-up, right? So if you have an existing report that you want to emulate in here, bring that to the table so you're not building blind. These are the subscriptions for CFR, by the way, that we talked about. So available in my reports, but also available here. Same page layout, same way to add subscriptions. You've got to have some saved views. And this will take you directly to the template. So you can access the templates for your reports directly from the templates pane or directly from the report you've selected right here. So that'll take you into the template. So let's look at what it looks like to build a template. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to go to templates. I'm going to create a template. And these are our options. We've already talked about all the reporting options. There's an extra one here you might see, profit and loss date range. I really don't recommend using that a lot because that's going to limit the column structure you can use in your build, right? It's really, you're not going to be able to tie into any of your calendars and pull in week to date, period to date. It's really just going to be looking for a date range. So for today, I'm going to use our regular P&L template. We'll just call this P&L webinar. And that's going to take us into the builder. So there's really only 4 sections to this. We're going to edit the template. And the first section I want to look at is the header, right? If I click into any of these dotted boxes, that's going to allow me to edit what's inside them. So not a ton going on here. It's my header. I can, right, left, justify, change the font, change the color. I will call out these little @ symbols. Those are dynamic fields, meaning that is going to display whatever parameters you run the report for. So like for CFR, I might want to just add a period ending, knowing that my date is going to populate in there when I run the report. And then my org unit's going to populate in there. So for individual P&Ls, this will be the location. For consolidated, it's just going to say consolidated. I'm going to jump down to the other section, which is the footer. Again, not a lot going on here, but I do like to call this out. If you want to get rid of powered by us, you could do that. If you want to get rid of your dynamic page numbering, you can do that. I like to add down here, in addition to date and timestamp, if I click my little @ symbol, I get these additional options. I'm going to add username and put a space between them. So now, whenever my reports get run, I know who ran it and when they ran it. So I like that from an auditing perspective, especially for financial packages. All right, next, let's get into rows, and then we'll finish with columns. So I've got my header, my footer. Now I need to decide what the GL structure of my report is going to look like. And so we're going to preload you with 2 defaults, P&L detail and P&L summary. And those tie directly back to that P&L layout format we looked at. Those are your core canned GLs. And like anything else in CFR, they're tagged as default, which means you cannot make changes to them. You cannot delete them. You cannot alter them. The minute I make a change to this default layout, I'm going to have to save it as new. And this is a good place to start, right? We can start with our default layout, start making changes to it, and then save it as new. I do recommend, you'll notice there's a page count here. This is telling you how many reports are using these row layouts. I don't recommend having a lot of custom row layouts. I'm in a demo database, so obviously we've got a lot of junk in here. The reason I don't recommend having a lot of these, especially if you're not using one of them, I would delete it, is that outside of the default row layouts, these will not update automatically. So if you're adding a GL account or a balance sheet account to your regular GL, you're going to have to come back here and add it to any custom row layouts you've made. So really important you get your sort of P&L dialed in, your balance sheet dialed in, and you're really only managing a handful of custom row layouts. Otherwise, that ongoing maintenance can become a lot. And then obviously, once you're in the row layout, you can dictate how the rows behave, right? We can flip our signs for our revenue. We can hide rows, right? So if we don't want a certain line item on the P&L to be shown. And as you're working on your custom row layouts, you're going to get a little preview of what it's going to look like on the report right here. And like I said, once we're in CFR, you can do whatever you want. We can move total gross to the top. It still knows what rows it's referencing, and it's still going to reference those. And you can really strip out. We could even just start from scratch, right? If we wanted to, we could just say, you know what, I'm going to pull up a test GNL, or typically I start with the summary. We'll discard our changes. I could select all, and you can just delete it, wipe it out, start from scratch, and then you can start adding accounts by number, right? If I just wanted to add that, You can also add accounts by range, right? If we look at the P&L summary, you'll see here, because we are doing it by summary level, we're going to roll all the accounts up into the single line items. And so you can do this in a couple of ways. You can separate them by commas, or we can separate them by colon. So here I could have just done 4,000 colon 4,022, and it would have captured all the accounts in that range. And it's actually a really good way to build these reports because it sort of future-proofs them. That way, if you do add accounts within that range, they will get added to that report, right? So there are ways around manually updating all of your custom row layouts by adding those sort of ranges if you want to. And then, of course, we can add custom calculations. You don't have to do the plus, 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 plus. You can do the colon. I could do row 2, colon, row 8, and that would just capture everything between those rows and add them to a summary line. There are guardrails in place here that will prevent you from deleting accounts that are part of a calculation. So if you are manipulating one of the canned row layouts, you're probably going to want to strip out some of the formulas, or you're not going to be able to manipulate some of your row layouts. Again, there's a lot we can do in here. Like I said, the easiest way to get started on this tool is to have a mock-up or a report you want to emulate, come in here and start building it out. So once I've got the row layout in a place I like it, then I'm going to my columns. And this is where, for me, the tool really starts to hum, right? So out of the box, we're going to preload you with a bunch of default columns like a trailing 12, period versus year to date, period versus budget. But you can build as many different column layouts as you like. You can do financial, budget, calculation. And as we start to add more columns, you're going to get more options for what you can do with those columns. So if I was adding a financial column, now you see why I didn't want to use the custom date range, because this allows me to go by day, by week, by period, by quarter, year to date. I'm going to call these out as well. These are consolidated columns. So if I wanted to build, let's say, a true trailing 12 that doesn't go back to last year, right? That just goes to January, right? A lot of people get upset that our trailing 12 is a true trailing 12. Well, I just want to see my trailing periods for the current year I'm in. That's what this will do. Year to date consolidated by period. That's all I need to do. Now, if I run this report for April, it's going to go back to January, and I'll have a column for each period. So super powerful way to build reports quickly. So let's say we do year-to-date collated by week. I just built a 52-column report, and that's all I had to do. So really easy way to get up and running quickly. And you'll notice here it's mad at me because it wants a header. These are dynamic too. So if I click my little @ symbol, I've got options, time frame type value, depending on how you like to see your data, and that will populate with the parameters you use. Let's add a budget column. So we'll do year to date. Let's just do period selected. We'll do budget, period selected, and then I can do my better worse. I want to see the difference between these two columns, right? So I can say better worse column. I can do my variance, and I can say, okay, show me the difference between column 1 and column 2. So you can start to build these out really dynamically, depending on how you want to see your data, right? Imagine this first column set is period, and then the next column set could be quarter, and the next column set could be year to date. And then we could run this report for all of the locations and have that report generated in a multi-tab workbook. The other thing we can do on these reports, if we want this structure repeated, is I can add another header and drag this across the top. And so now this header is encompassing everything below it, and I can tell it to repeat, not just based on location, but also by those location reporting categories we talked about. So everything comes back to those, right? These are really, really powerful. So if I was going to repeat this by location, and then I can add my dynamic header, org value. So now I've built an actual versus budget report that's going to repeat by location side by side. So when I go run the report, depending on the locations I pick in my org tree, this structure is going to repeat over and over again for all the locations I've selected with my checkboxes. And the last thing I'll do, just because it'll be easier to read, I'm going to add a vertical line, right? So that way we're separating the data between stores. And if I go down below, you're going to see, oh, here's a nice little preview of what my report's going to look like. So I've got actual versus budget with a variance that's going to repeat by location for everything I run. That is the tip of the iceberg on this module. There is so much more we can do in here, but we are running out of a little bit of time. I just wanted to give everybody sort of a high-level overview of how we can customize the reports, how we can build the reports in here. The last thing I want to show you, because I realized I didn't, was the P&L layout format. So that was hidden behind the P&L comparison. That was hidden behind that user role. If you're not seeing this, you need to enable it. The reason I love this report is it's the fastest, quickest way to find a P&L in our software. So I literally just went to this P&L comparison screen, hit view report. And the nice thing about it is it's dynamic. So first of all, if I'm a manager at this store, I see the other locations, but I don't see the names. It's just store 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So nice way to promote some healthy competition. And then if I click on cost of goods sold, the report's going to dynamically shift and shuffle to show me who's performing the best. So let's look at sales. There, I got my top sellers and my lowest sellers. So you can dynamically sort this report as well. So if you've never seen this before, it's probably because it's hidden behind that user role that I talked about at the beginning of the call. So hopefully you found a couple of reports you like on this call. Let's see if we've got any questions. We're going to do a quick poll though. I am curious, based on what you've seen. I'm going to launch the poll right now if you want to learn more about CFR, because if you do and you're hungry for content, then obviously we're going to do more of that. While that poll is up, I'm going to get into some Q&A. Who can I email so that I make sure I receive the recording? Well, if you're already here, you're going to get a copy of the recording. Don't worry, we're going to send it to you. I know I talk fast. I apologize. It was a lot to take in. But everybody that's on the call will get a copy of this recording sent to their inbox. Robert, I'm glad you're learning a lot. When you talked about saving the view for reports, do you mean that each user has to go in and save their own view? Well, yes and no. So you can create your own view, but then additionally, let's get to a report here. You can create the view you like and set it as public and then set it as default for all users. So you've got two options. You can do it both ways. Is it possible to flip the AVT report to use sales by COGS instead of net sales? So you're talking about, yes. So when you are running the AVT, that's a great question, Karen. Let's go to my reports. So by default, when we do percentage of sales on the AVT, it's, to your point, capturing everything. But on the customized panel for the AVT, you can dictate which sales accounts show up on that report. So if you wanted to maybe just run like a food AVT, then we could say, okay, let's just do food. And then let's just do accounts. We'll do sales food. These are searchable as well, and food comps. So now I've got an AVT that's just showing me my food items against my food net sales. So you have to do it at a category level, but you can do it. Doris, how can I have access to custom financial reports? Well, just talk to your customer success manager, and they can get you a demo and get it turned on for you. In CFR, is it possible to multiply a row by a constant? Yeah, so we can do that in the columns in CFR, right? So we can add a calculation and say, okay, whatever's happening in row 4, multiply that by 6, right? So that's a really easy way to add those sort of dynamic calculations if you wanted to. I realize row 4 is a blank line. Let's do row 2 times 6. There you go. Is there a way to run inventory reports, multiple locations at once? So we do have an above store AVT if you haven't seen that. So this will run the AVT at a item level, and then you can drill into each item and see the activity at the store level. We can also build custom inventory reports in CFR. So that's a pretty common ask. We'll build a combination report that uses the balance sheet account so I can see my inventory balances and my COGS account so I can see my cost of goods all in one report. And obviously we can repeat that column structure by location like I showed you so that we can have a multi-location COGS and inventory report. But if you haven't seen the above store theoretical, that is a great place to start for sort of that above store AVT reporting. And yes, Richard, the recording will be sent out and you guys can all watch it in slow motion because I move so fast. I feel like it takes 15 to 20 minutes for the reports to update. Teresa, I assume you're talking about the custom financial reports. It should not take that long. We do a data sync about every 2 minutes. So if that's the case, I would get a support ticket in. Mark's not seeing the new nav experience. This isn't live for everybody yet. It is in beta, but it is coming soon. I wanted to do the webinar with this enabled just to sort of future-proof it. So most of you are still probably used to this old view, but the new nav experience is coming, so that's why I wanted to turn it on so you guys can all see it. Yeah, Danielle, CFR is an add-on. So talk to your CSM, talk to your account executive. They can get you pricing on it. Like I said, if you've got more than 5 or 6 stores, it just streamlines that whole reporting process at the end of the month. It's a real value add. I think it pays for itself in time saved. What's the best way to maintain custom row layouts? Like, how do I know what rows I'm missing after I've added accounts? That's a good question, Mark. So that's really tricky, right? Because you really need to get in some sort of SOP where when you add that account to your GL, you are updating your CFR at the same time. Otherwise, you are going to lose track of those. One thing you could do is export your GL to Excel and export your row layouts to Excel and look for dupes. And obviously, if you're not finding some dupes, then we know we're missing a row layout. The other way to future-proof them is using the colon structure I talked about, doing a range of accounts. That way, any account you add within that range is going to get added to your row layouts automatically. Can we add different locations in a column? You can. So that's a great call out. I didn't call that out, right? So let me get rid of this header, and you'll notice now in the columns, I've got options here to lock these columns. So again, location reporting categories. So I can tie these columns to brand. So imagine a brand side-by-side P&L. I got my taco concept, my burger concept, and all those locations are rolled up into columns side-by-side. Or I could do it by district manager, right? I could do that. So you can lock these columns to locations and reporting categories. So you can build some really cool reports in here. For data pulls for reports like the flash or daily sales, the way to adjust the information so that it pulls a date range rather than week or period. So we have added on a lot of the ops reports, let me go back to my reports, a date range option, and we did add that to the flash and to the daily sales report. So if you pull those open now, you're going to see there's a date range toggle that you can enable. So that exists on the flash report as well. So you can enable that, save that view, and run it for very specific date ranges now. That is relatively new, so you might not have seen that, Selena. You said this is the tip of the iceberg. How can we get deeper into the iceberg? Great question. First of all, get CFR, watch the Academy videos, and then reach out to your CSM, and they will submit a ticket to the Solutions Architect team, and we will give you a full 1-hour consult on this tool. We'll do it. And like I said, I recommend coming to that with a report you're looking to build, right? And then we could start the build process, and usually you'll leave with your report either done or halfway completed, and then you can finish it on your own. How do we enable new nav? Again, if you're not seeing this, it hasn't rolled out to your server environment, but just be aware it is coming. How do you enter budgets? Well, that's a whole other webinar, but I will show you right here. There is a budgeting module. It lives in reports. And you can create budgets at the location level, by year, by calendar, by period or week. If you want to create a budget, I would reach out to your CSM, have them set up a budgeting review call, or look in the support center, just search the word budgets. It's a pretty easy process, but yeah, we have a fully baked budgeting tool that will allow you to import those. Shruti, how can I find the P&L comparison report? So if you're in the old nav experience, or the new nav experience, as you say, it's in my reports. If you're in the old nav experience, it's right here. If you're not seeing it, that's because it's hidden behind a user setting, right? So we talked about this at the beginning of the call. In the user permissions tree, there is a specific toggle for the P&L comparison report. So you need to enable that for yourself, or you're not going to see it. Standard P&L layout. Is there a standard P&L layout to compare? Yeah, so that was one of the reports we reviewed. This P&L layout format, this is what you want to be looking at, because this is what's driving the canned reports for all of your P&Ls. Custom financial. So Nicole, if you don't see custom financial reports and it is enabled, it is hidden behind a user setting. If you don't have it enabled, reach out to your CSM or your account executive. Very helpful. Thank you, Cindy. You're looking for a report that can give you product usage and a period of time for ordering purposes. I would look at that receiving by purchase item report and then look at the stock usage report. That'll show you your purchasing and your usage. Don't have the new nav experience. Yeah. How to run running totals to P&L statement in Classic. So to add running totals, you want to run the profit and loss layout. And then here you're going to see if there's a hidden row. Like obviously I don't need one. I got total sales already. But you just drill in to the hidden row. I think this is the, so right here, if I wanted to add non-operating activity, I could drill into that. And then in every GL account or GL type, there's a report settings tab. And that's where you'll see the running total option, and you can enable it and name it. No, Shruti, P&L comparison is going to be in the side toolbar. So like I said, it's either going to be in the new nav experience under my reports or in the old nav experience also under reports. You should see it right there. It's its own module, so to speak. Yeah, so Amy, the reports, if you want to report all locations for budget, we can consolidate. When you consolidate your reports, we're going to consolidate the budget data as well. We can use CFR for labor, yes, Doris, but not for forecast purposes. We don't have forecasts in CFR. We only have budgets. Standard reporting, if you have a fiscal monthly budget designed for reporting, can you still add weekly budgets? You can. The trick is you can only have one reporting budget active at a time. So when you are in the budgeting software, there's a toggle on the budget to tell you whether that's the reporting budget or not. So this column here. I would argue if you have a weekly budget in place, we're going to scale that and roll it up so you will have period data. But depending on how the reporting budget it is enabled, yes or no, that's what's going to show up on your reports. Above store is different from the AVT because it's just that it's above store. It's going to show like chicken, actual versus theoretical for the whole company. And then if you drill into that chicken item, then you'll see the information by location. Recording should be sent out probably within the next 24 hours. Labor data is not pulling into my sales and prime cost report. The first thing I would check are your operational reporting categories. So if we look at your GL accounts, I would make sure you have your labor accounts tagged as labor front of house, back of house. That's what's driving a lot of the reports we look at today. So those operational reporting categories are super critical. Able to build an AVT that has food, liquor, beer, wine to get the percentage by COGS account. No. Karen, you got to do them individually, I'm afraid, like I showed you. Sammy, how are you, man? CFR to create a report with customizable dates for other users. Do I have to start with a template? You can add that to an existing template, but it depends on the template you started with, right? So if it's a custom date template, you're fine. If it's not, then you will have to start over. Date range on Flash report, does it pull the same date range for prior year? Yes, it does. Do we have this report by location, side by sides, period, year-to-date budgets under my reports? So there is, if you go into my reports and you look at the P&L, we have a location side by side P&L, but I think the report you're looking for is period year-to-date versus budget side by side. I would argue we could build that in CFR, Shruti, but that is going to be a massive report. It's going to be the length of a football field, but we can do it, absolutely. Can you change the font on these reports? Absolutely. So any time you're in here, you can click on the select all, and here you can change the formatting, you can change the header, the data, and then when you go to run the report, there's an option to change the font. So in CFR, it's in the settings. When I go to run the report, I can say, you know what, I want this in Helvetica or Tahoma or Arial. So you can change the font, you can change the landscape, the layout, the output, you can play with the margins, you can do all sorts of customizations. CFR showing cost lower than budget. How do I change this? I recommend reaching out to your CSM and setting up a call. We can definitely dig into that. AVT analysis, replace a function need. Yes, it would replace the need for Zapier. So if you've got a current workflow where we're grabbing that from an email, I would set up that report subscription, and then you could dump it. It could go right to the Google Sheets. Like I said, that just rolled out. It's pretty new. Does it work with subscriptions? Selena, basically everything I showed you today works with subscriptions, except the P&L comparison report. Somebody says my audio dropped. Oh, thank you. Lots of great info, great webinar. All right, we're going to do one more poll here right at the end just to see what else you're hungry for in terms of how you want to digest this content. Let me find it. Preferred learning, take a look. And then I will remind everybody, we are going to be in Dallas on June 3rd. We're going to be in San Diego for our national conference. You're very welcome, Selena. Thanks for joining. And we're going to be in New York on December 3rd. So if you haven't been to an RTT, it's a great place to come meet people like me, engage with other users. It's usually a lot of fun too. We always have a good time. That QR code will take you to the landing page if you want to buy tickets. I know we went a little over, and I know we started a little bit late, so I think it all worked out. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday. And with that, I will cut you loose. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you learned something. We'll see you at the next one. Take care, everybody.